Hi friend, welcome to my channel, Homestead Life, and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Teresa, and I'd like you to join me today while I make some no-knead bread loaves. Okay, today we're gonna start with my 16-quart bowl, and we are going to start with 6 cups all-purpose flour. And so I'm gonna measure this out. 1, 2, I've done no-knead bread before, but never as a loaf. So I'm changing this recipe up just a little bit. Let's see, we want a tablespoon salt. I actually measure it because I'm baking. Normally, if I was just cooking, I wouldn't. I'm just using Redmond's real salt because that's what I prefer. And then we do a tablespoon of white sugar. And then we're gonna do a half or a quarter stick or 2 tablespoons of melted butter. And we're gonna bring this and put this in here. Now, the next step is going to be adding our yeast and our flour. 2 1/4 teaspoons instant yeast. That's 1/2 and 1, 1/2 and 2, and then a quarter yeast. And the next thing we're going to be doing is 3 cups of warm water. Now you want your water to be no higher than 110 degrees Fahrenheit. We are under the 110 mark. And basically it's just warm to the touch. So we're going to add this now. And now we're going to give it a nice mix. Just kind of incorporate this all together. Some people have been known to use spoons or dough whisks. When I made the last dough, I did it in my KitchenAid, and I think it didn't work as well as I would have hoped. Now we're gonna mix this into a shaggy dough. Okay, now we're gonna put this in a nice warm place now that we've got this all kind of mixed up together. And a good warm place is in your oven with it turned off, but with your light on for a little bit of heat. And if you didn't know, my hands were clean. And I'm sorry if I sound a little tired. I was planning on doing this video about an hour and a half ago, and then I got a phone call from my son in Utah who wanted to talk. Okay, so now we're gonna put a towel over this. We're going to put it in the oven for about 40 minutes or so until it doubles in size. Okay, let's put this in the oven. And I'm going to turn the oven light on. Put this in the oven. And I'm gonna set my timer for 40 minutes. And once that timer goes off, we'll be back. Okay, so just a little recap. We've gone ahead and we've mixed together our 6 cups of all-purpose flour, our tablespoon salt, our tablespoon of white sugar, our butter, the warm water, and our yeast. And then we mix that up together as good as we could. There's a couple of other ways that I think I could do it. I'm a little tired today, so I need to learn to start this at a lot earlier time in the day instead of like trying to bake bread at 9 o'clock at night. I have it still in the oven, just under the light. I just have the light. And I did say, I think 40 minutes before, and I was wrong. I need to let that rise for an hour and a half. 40 minutes is what I'll be doing here in a minute. And I have our cutter here, because what I'm gonna do is as soon as this comes out, I'm gonna punch it down a little bit. I'm gonna kind of cut it in half. I'm gonna divide it and put it into 2 buttered pans. So right now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and I am going to take our 2 pans and I'm gonna get them all buttered up. I'm gonna wanna have my fingers buttered here in a few minutes as well to work with the dough. But right now I'm just trying to take some of the grease here and get this, or the butter, and get this all buttered up. Okay, so our pans are thoroughly buttered, and you want to make sure they're generously buttered. Never gonna have them absolutely perfect, and that's okay. And we should be about ready for our timer to go off here. I have some more butter sitting here waiting for me. Now I use butter, not margarine. You could actually use a cooking spray if you wanted to, of any sort if you wanted to, but I like the butter, just it gives it a little bit different texture and taste. So we've got less than a minute here. So let's go ahead and I'm going to see what we can do here. We've got 21 seconds. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring the bowl out. What we have, and it has risen some. It's not risen a ton, but it's risen some. And what we're gonna do is I can still feel it being poofy. So I'm gonna take off my wedding ring because that will get all the dough in there. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna butter up my hands. Yay, butter. And then we are going to work on the dough. I'm just gonna kind of, it's nice and warm. Kind of bringing it together here. Okay, and then I am going to try to separate this, and that's where this wonderful thing can come in handy, where we're just gonna try to cut the dough in half, okay? And I wanna see if maybe I have about the right. It's hard for me not to go ahead and kind of knead it just a little bit because it's just like a habit for me. When it comes to dough, it feels close. So we're gonna go ahead and just put this in our loaf pans. It looks like this one may have just a little bit more, but it's okay. We're gonna go ahead and leave it. I'm gonna go ahead and put this back in there for another 40 minutes covered, just so that it can proof up a little bit more. So let's get this back into the oven and set our timer for 40 minutes. That's where I got the 40 minutes from. And we'll be back in 40 minutes. All right, we have our beeper going off, our timer. So let's go ahead and pull our bread out and see, did it do what it was supposed to do and double in size, which it's filled out our pans nicely. So now I'm gonna go ahead and I am going to preheat my oven. I'm gonna turn off this light and I'm gonna bake for at 375. So we're gonna go ahead and start this out. We're gonna put our bread in the oven to bake for about 40 minutes. Hey, 40 minutes is a big thing here. And then we are going to take these out and we will be back as soon as, well, actually, I'll be back with you as soon as I put them in the oven. Now, I was just thinking, I wish I would have had this bread recipe when COVID had hit and we were on lockdown. I remember back when you couldn't find any bread anywhere. And I had a bunch of flour, I had yeast, I had all the makings to make this. And my husband absolutely loves bread. I can take it or leave it, but my husband loves bread. He loves his sandwiches, he likes toast, he likes bread with ketchup on it of all weird things, so he loves bread. And when we couldn't find bread at the stores, that was something that was really difficult for him, and he used to kind of whine, and I remember every time I would go out for groceries, I would try to find bread, and for a while we couldn't find it. So if I really wish we would have had this recipe, I think I probably would have made it daily. So far, this has been really super easy. I would say, actually, it's been easier than the other no-knead dough recipe that I have that's not for the loaf. I'm sure I mean, they're very similar. So I'll have to actually look at the two recipes and see what the difference between the big round loaf is and this one. The only difference that I have really noticed was all the recipes that I have for the big round loaf is kind of like leave it overnight and let it proof in warm area. This recipe, as well as a couple of other people that I've seen making similar recipes, have all done not having the oven on, but putting your dough in the oven with the light on for a warming factor. Something, again, so unbelievably simple that I would have never thought to do had I not seen it from somebody else. So hopefully some of the tips and tricks I learned I can pass on to y'all, and it might help somebody, it might not, but hey, I've been baking bread since a long time. The first time I ever baked a loaf of bread, it was in the 80s. We're in the 2000s. So think about that for a minute. I have baked bread and rolls and cakes and all these other things, and never, not once has anybody ever said to do that. So just food for thought. Alrighty, our oven has been preheated. We're gonna go ahead and put these in now for 40 minutes and see what this looks like 40 minutes from now. Let's set the timer and I will see you in 40 minutes. Alrighty friends, it looks like our bread should be about done. There's a minute or so left, so I'm gonna go ahead and grab this just because I can smell the bread very much. So I take the bread out and I'm pouring it over and talk to you about it real quick. One of the things, just go ahead and turn this off or I'll forget it, that you're gonna wanna do is make sure that your bread has a hollow sound. We're gonna wanna let this cool on the rack for a few minutes here. You don't want it super duper hot. And then we're gonna put some butter on the top of it. The butter on the top will soften that top crust so that as it cools down, it's more like the kind of bread that you would get at the grocery store. So we're gonna go ahead and do that as soon as it cools off. Let me give it about 10-15 minutes and we'll be right back. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes and these have been cooling on this rack over there. I just moved it over here. I'm gonna go ahead and just take some butter, rub a little bit on here to soften that. So we have our butter top and it'll melt really nicely. And then I'm gonna do this over here. You can see that definitely this one had a little bit more in it than the other. That's okay. I mean, I'm not selling the bread or anything. This is just for our personal consumption. So there we go. Okay. Now that we've got this like that, go ahead and turn the bread out and let it continue to cool on this rack overnight. Or at least for a few hours. It's not as hot as I thought it would be. These cool down pretty quickly on the rack. So we've got these here, and we will go ahead and let these sit for a little while and cool down, and then I will cut into it shortly. And I'll bring you along for that. Okay, so everything's cooled off a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna, it feels a little heavy, so I don't know, let's try this. But you can see the condensation under there. So let's go ahead and slice a piece of bread. It looks just like normal sandwich bread. So I'm gonna go ahead, let me get a knife, and I'm gonna take a little bit of butter and I'm going to spread a little bit on this here. So now let's take a little taste test. It's actually really good. Like if you see, it tears apart just like regular bread. It's obviously a little thicker because I did pick the end piece. It was really good. I don't eat a lot of bread, but this is a good piece of bread. Okay, let's see if it passes the princess test. Princess, sit. Can you sit? Good girl. You like that? Okay. Petunia. Sit. Oh, good girl. So, even the dogs like the bread. We've got one more. Bubba. Bubba. Guess he's not coming for bread. All right, that's all. Thank you for joining me with my bread adventure tonight and trying this recipe. I will try and put the recipe below or the link to a recipe that's very similar or the actual recipe if I can find it again. And